Hello once again, Erido speaking, and today I will be doing a Let's Paint of the Super Dungeon Explorer Twilight Knight. Now then, a little disclaimer here is that this miniature is currently out of print. It's no longer being made by Ninja Division or Soda Pop Miniatures, and it took me quite a while to hunt this thing down. I mean, really like to thank Peter Mons, if I'm not pronouncing that right, I'm sorry, but he was able to sell me one off of Facebook, so I was able to actually get this mini. Now then, I have painted Twilight Knights before, but I'm going to be demonstrating a few of the techniques that I do anyway. And the first thing is that we're going to be doing her cloak. And her cloak has this little bit of a greenish, bluish hue to it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some aqua and I'm going to dry brush it along her cloak. Just light dry brushing along the whole of her cloak to give it that nice worn look. And once I'm done with that, we will go on to the next step. As you can see, we got all that nice highlighting on there, giving it that nice bluish green finish like in the original artwork. Next, we're going to take some pavement and we are going to start painting along her boots and her gauntlets and her sword. Just carefully getting into those little areas right there. Now then, once we're done, I'm going to take a bit of pewter gray and mix it with a little bit of blue to give it that little bluish gray coloring, and just dry brush it all over the black. Now then, the sword, however, I'm going to just go with the basics gray, but for her armor, I'm going to be actually mixing the blue with the gray and getting a little bit of a bluish gray tint to it. So once I'm done with that, I'll show you the end result there. Okay, it's a little hard to see on camera, but there is the highlight shade on there. The tone I was using wasn't exactly dark enough, so I added a little bit of pavement to it. Next, I mixed in some brown and pavement to get this really dark brown color, almost like dark chocolate. We're going to be using it on her belts and her brassiere, because they're kind of dark, but they still have a little bit of a brown highlight to it. So I'm just going to carefully trim, ignore the alarm, but you can just carefully trim around the chest area and around the belts and the kneecaps, because there's a little bit on the kneecaps too. So just carefully do that, and I will continue when we get on to the next step. As you can see, we got it on there. Now then, off camera, I mixed in some marsh green, some aqua, a little bit of pewter gray, and a little bit of pavement until I was able to get something close to the shade of the armor on her brassiere. So we're just going to take that and just lightly trim it on the side underneath the area right there. It's not well defined on the miniature, but it is there, so I'm just going to cut away for a second and I'll be right back. Again, it's kind of hard to see on the small resolution of my camera, but it is there. Now then, before turning on the camera, I mixed in a little bit of golden sunset with a little bit of brown oxide to get that nice bronze color on the lower part of the brassiere. So we're just going to take that and just carefully trim on the bottom here and a bit on the back. Have to be very careful here, so I'm just going to cut the camera and I'll be back to show you the result. Okay, as you can see, we got that nice trim on there, including that little band on the arm. Almost forgot about that. Anyway, next up we're going to just take some flat up pavement and do the arms, because as you can see on the Twilight Knight, both of her arms are covered in just a kind of grayish black, as well as the underwear section as well, which we have to be very careful to paint. So I'm going to finish that up and we'll go on to the next step. Okay, got the black in there now. Oh, pavement anyway. Next we're going to take parchment and we're going to start coloring her hair and the wrappings around her legs. So just take that. This is a bit of an off-white. It's not pure white. And as you can see on both the Super Dungeon Explorer and the actual artwork, it is not exactly flat white. It's just an off-white. So I'm just going to take parchment and just carefully, be careful not to paint over the details we already have on the hood, and careful not to hit on any of the leg armor there. It's also a bit of a transparent color because of its whiteness, so I'm going to cut away and we'll go on to the next step from here. Now, if you can see, after a few coats, we got it just about done. I also watered down some of the brown and made it into a kind of a wash around the bandages around her leg to give that little worn look that it was needed. Now next up we're going to take some peach. We're going to start painting her face, her chest, her stomach, and areas around her thighs, which are actually going to be the most difficult part. Again, peach is one of those colors in here that doesn't take too well. It takes a few coats before it actually coats properly. So again, I will be returning after I'm done here. As you can see, we got all the skin on there. Took a long time, especially down here, but next we're going to move on to the next step. We are going to take some white and we're actually going to paint that lantern right there on her hip. Now I know what you're thinking. Why are we painting it white? Well, you're going to see, because we're going to use a blue wash to get a nice little glow effect in there to make sure that it actually looks like a glowing lantern. So once we're done with that, we'll go on to the next step. Well, I made a bit of a mistake here. It turns out this isn't a blue wash, it's an armor wash. So what I had to do was actually take this and kind of make a pseudo wash out of that by watering it down a little. See, I do have a nice little hint of blue there. And I also took the dark wash and washed over the armor bits on her legs and her arms and the sword. So yeah, there's that little mix up. Anyway, next we're going to take some pewter gray. Make sure it's nice and mixed up here. And we're going to paint the trim on the lantern there. Just carefully trim it up. The bottom, the edges, and everything in between. It's going to take a few coats, so I'm just going to cut here and come back to it a little later. As you can see, we're just about done. Not only did I do what I was set out to do, I also added some other really small detail work, like putting some bronze on the sword hilt, the same washing effect on the ends there of the sword. And I also picked out the trim of her eyebrows and trimmed in the silver in her kneecaps. Now then, next we're going to just tackle in a bunch of small detail work here. First off, we're going to be putting that red ribbon that's in her hair. As you can see, I lift that little bit right there. And then we're going to trim a little right on her brow, as well as the trim right here on the end of our sword. We're also going to be taking some very light gray, if I can find it here, because I know it's up here. Here we go. We're going to take this really light gray and paint the entirety of her sword. And next we're going to take some black and trim the edges of her eyes, white, And then we're going to use this blue for her eye color. So we're going to do her eyes, her the ribbon in her hair, and we're going to do her sword all in one little step here. So once I'm done with that, I will show you the end result and go on to the final step. Okay, as you can see, the eyes are done, the sword is done, and that red ribbon around her hair is done. I don't want to hear Dragon Ball Z jokes. I also added just a hint of pink right there at the lips so that you can actually see her mouth. Anyway, the next step, I'm pretty sure anyone who's seen my previous Let's Paints of Super Dungeon Explorer miniatures will know what's coming. We take straight up black and we paint the entirety of the base, carefully not touching anywhere where the feet are. And then once we're done, we'll take some of the granite gray and we're going to dry brush it on the top of the base and then retrim the edge in black to give it a nice little contrast. Anyway, once I'm done, I will show you the final product. Okay, as you can see, I took the liberty of cleaning up before I did this, but as you can see, stuck on the paper there, it's all done. I also forgot to add the little bronze detail at the end of the sword. Nearly forgot that. Anyway, for comparison, here is the original resin version of the pinup Twilight Knight. And here is the plastic version, which I dubbed the Twilight Sparkle Knight, as you can see from the color scheme. As you can see, I try to get it as close as possible to my previous attempts at painting the Twilight Knight. I have to say, it is fairly close to that. Anyway, that is my Let's Paint video for the Super Dungeon Explorer Twilight Knight, and I hope to see you guys again next video. Bye!